When 16-year-old Zoe Jenkins disappeared without a trace on a rainy November night in 1990, the small town of Pinewood was changed forever. Her father Marlowe never gave up searching, even after everyone else lost hope. For 22 long years, Marlowe kept his daughter's bedroom exactly as she left it, a shrine to the girl who vanished on her way home from drama practice. His marriage fell apart. His career ended early, but still he waited for answers that never came. Then one day in 2012, while sitting alone on what would have been Zoe's 38th birthday, Marlowe finds a dusty box of her school things. Inside is a yearbook he hasn't looked at in decades. As he flips through the faded pages, he notices something strange about the photos. Something everyone missed during the original investigation. The quiet boy who always seemed to be watching Zoe. The uncomfortable look on her face whenever he was near, and a small handwritten note in the margin that will unravel everything Marlowe thought he knew about his daughter's disappearance. Was the real killer hiding in plain sight all these years? And what other dark secrets will Marlowe uncover when he finally learns the truth about what happened on that rainy night in 1990? The morning light cut through the dusty blinds, making thin golden lines across the faded pink bedspread. Marlowe Jenkins sat on the edge of the small twin bed, his weight making the old springs creak in protest. The sound echoed in the quiet room, a room that hadn't changed in 22 years. Today was September 15th, 2012. Zoe would have been 38 today. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Marlowe whispered, his voice rough with age and sadness. He ran his weathered hand over the bedspread, smoothing out wrinkles that didn't exist. Everything in this room was perfect, frozen in time. The posters of rock, bands from the late 80s still hung on the walls, their edges curling slightly with age. Madonna and Bon Jovi smiled down at him, young forever, just like his Zoe. On the dresser, a collection of perfume bottles gathered dust. Marlowe never allowed anyone to clean this room, not the parade of housekeepers his ex-wife Veronica had hired before she left, not the cleaning lady who came once a month now to help him with the rest of the house. This room was his to maintain, his connection to Zoe. Marlowe picked up the framed photo on the nightstand. Zoe's sophomore year school picture. Her sandy blonde hair, so like his own before it turned gray, framed her face in soft waves. Her green eyes, Veronica's eyes, sparkled with a joy that made his chest ache. She was wearing the silver necklace her grandmother had given her for her 13th birthday. Zoe never took it off. It was one of the many things that disappeared with her. "Your mom called yesterday," Marlowe said to the photo. "She's doing okay. Still in Florida. Still married to what's name." Talking to Zoe's photo was a ritual he performed every year on her birthday. Some might call it crazy, but Marlowe didn't care. In this room, he could pretend that she was just away at college or on a trip, that she might walk through the door any minute with her big laugh and bigger dreams. The truth was harder to face. On November 12, 1990, 16-year-old Zoe Jenkins walked out of play practice at Pinewood High School and vanished without a trace. No body, no clues, no closure. The search consumed the small town of Pinewood for months. Marlowe and Veronica appeared on news programs begging for information. They printed flyers, organized search parties, hired private investigators when the police investigation stalled. Nothing. As the months turned to years, hope faded. Veronica couldn't bear it. She wanted to pack up Zoe's things, to accept that their daughter was gone. Marlowe refused. They fought, ugly screaming matches that ended with slammed doors and tears. 10 years after Zoe disappeared, Veronica left too. She moved to Florida, remarried, tried to build a new life. Marlowe stayed. He couldn't leave the house where Zoe grew. Couldn't give up the hope that someday she might find her way home. He set the photo back on the nightstand and picked up the small stuffed rabbit that sat on Zoe's pillow. Mr. Flopsy had been her favorite since she was a baby. She was too cool to admit it by 16, but Marlowe knew she still slept with the well-loved toy. Its fur was worn thin in spots from years of hugs. "We're not giving up, are we, Mr. Flopsy?" Marlowe asked the rabbit. Its black button eyes stared back, offering no answers. At 65, Marlowe had been retired for 3 years now. After 30 years of teaching shop at Pinewood High, he couldn't take the whispers anymore. The sad looks from teachers who remembered Zoe, the curious stares from students who knew the story of the girl who disappeared. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 10 times. Marlowe sighed and pushed himself up from the bed. His knee protested, reminding him of the surgery he'd put off again last month. What was the point of fixing his knee when so much else remained broken? He shuffled to the window and lifted the dusty blinds. Outside, Pinewood looked the same as it always had. The maple trees lining Cedar Street were just starting to turn, gold and red. Mrs. Waverly next door was watering her mums. Life went on, stubbornly normal. 22 years. More than half of Zoe's life now existed only in Marlowe's imagination. He'd created a whole timeline of what-ifs. What if Zoe had gone to college? What if she'd gotten married? Would he have grandchildren by now? Would they have her green eyes and easy laugh? Marlowe let the blinds drop and turned back to the room. He should go downstairs, make some coffee, check the mail. But each year, leaving this room on Zoe's birthday got harder, not easier. It felt like abandoning her all over again. Just a little longer, he promised himself. He opened Zoe's closet, running his fingers over the clothes that still hung there. Jeans with rips that were actually in style back then. T-shirts from concerts she'd attended with friends. The blue dress she wore to her first homecoming dance. On the closet floor were her shoes. Converse sneakers in 3 different colors, sandals for summer, winter boots, and the black heels she borrowed from Veronica for that homecoming dance. Marlowe smiled at the memory of Zoe wobbling around the house in those heels, practicing her walk before the dance. The smile faded as quickly as it came. So many firsts Zoe had missed. So many memories never made. Marlowe closed the closet door and took one last look around the room. The posters, the stuffed animals, the jewelry box on the dresser, the books on the shelf. Each item a piece of the puzzle that was his daughter. A puzzle forever missing its final pieces. "See you tomorrow, Zoe," he said softly. A promise he'd kept for 22 years. As he stepped into the hallway and pulled the door closed, his eyes caught on a cardboard box shoved into the back corner of the hall closet. The words "school stuff" were written on the side in Veronica's neat handwriting. Marlowe stared at the box for a long moment. He'd looked through it years ago, hadn't he? Or had it been too painful? Another task put off as time slipped by. Something tugged at him, a feeling he couldn't name. With a grunt, he reached into the closet and pulled the box out, sending a cloud of dust into the air. "Let's see what we've got here," he murmured, carrying the box downstairs to the kitchen table, unaware that inside lay the first real clue to his daughter's disappearance, hidden in plain sight for 22 years. The box left a trail of dust as Marlowe set it on the kitchen table. He sneezed twice before grabbing a knife from the drawer to cut through the yellowed packing tape. The cardboard flaps resisted at first, then gave way with a sigh, releasing the smell of old paper and forgotten memories. Marlowe's coffee pot gurgled and hissed on the counter, but he ignored it. The first item in the box was a folder of report, cards. He smiled despite himself as he flipped through them. Zoe had been a solid B student, with A's in English and drama, C's in math. Her teachers' comments were always the same. Bright, but chatty. Creative, but needs to focus. A pleasure to have in class. Next came a stack of notebooks. Marlowe opened one to find Zoe's rounded handwriting, filling the pages with English essays about books he'd never read. Another held science notes with doodles in the margins, little stars and flowers, and the occasional heart with initials he didn't recognize. "So many pieces of you," Marlowe whispered, "and still not enough." At the bottom of the box, he found them, the yearbooks, 5 in total, from 6th grade through 10th. He'd avoided looking at them after Zoe disappeared. The police had checked them for clues, of course, but found nothing helpful. Just pictures of smiling kids who had no idea that one of them would vanish before the next yearbook came out. Marlowe's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the stack. The top one was Zoe's last, sophomore year at Pinewood High, 1989-1990. Its blue cover was scuffed at the corners and "Property of Zoe Jenkins. Don't touch or die" was written in black marker inside the front cover. "Sorry, kiddo," Marlowe said with a sad smile, "but I'm risking death today." He made himself that cup of coffee before sitting down with the yearbook. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across his backyard. The maple tree Zoe used to climb was ablaze with fall colors. He remembered her sitting in that tree for hours with a book, her legs dangling from a branch, refusing to come down for dinner until she finished just one more chapter. Marlowe opened the yearbook and began turning pages. There was the faculty section with younger versions of teachers he'd worked alongside for decades. Some were still at Pinewood, others retired or moved away. A few had passed on. Then came the student photos, arranged by grade. Marlowe's finger traced the columns of faces until he found her. Zoe Jenkins, 10th grade. Her school photo was different from the one on her nightstand. This one caught her mid-laugh, her eyes bright with mischief. He remembered the day she brought this yearbook home, how she'd complained that they used the stupid laughing one instead of her serious pose. "The laughing one is better," he'd told her. "It shows who you really are." "Dad, nobody wants to look like a hyena in their yearbook," she'd replied, rolling her eyes in that dramatic teenage way. The memory was so clear, it stole his breath for a moment. Marlowe continued through the book, past the individual photos to the activities section. Zoe appeared in several. Drama club. She'd been in the fall play. Our Town. Spanish club. Though she'd complained all year about how hard Spanish was, and there she was in the sophomore class photo, standing in the back row because she was tall for her age. Marlowe squinted at the photo. Something about it caught his attention, but he couldn't put his finger on what. He got up and rummaged in a kitchen drawer until he found a magnifying glass Veronica had used for her cross-stitching before she left. He sat back down and held the glass over the class photo, studying each face. There was Zoe in the back row, between Amy Whitfield and, Marlowe frowned, a boy named Ryan Calloway. Ryan had moved to town that year. Marlowe remembered him vaguely, a quiet kid with dark hair who'd taken shop class and built a decent bookshelf. What caught Marlowe's eye wasn't Ryan's face, but his arm. In the photo, Ryan had his arm around Zoe's waist, and now that Marlowe looked closely, he could see that Zoe was leaning away slightly. Her smile seemed forced, different from her natural laugh in her individual photo. Marlowe flipped to the drama club page. Both Zoe and Ryan were in the photo, standing on opposite ends of the group. But in the candid shot below, taken during rehearsal, Ryan was right behind Zoe again. Marlowe felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn day. He flipped through more pages, finding activity photos, candid shots from pep rallies, and lunch periods. In almost every photo with Zoe, Ryan Calloway was somewhere nearby, and in each one, if you looked carefully, Zoe's body language told a story that everyone had missed. She was leaning away, looking uncomfortable, her smile tight. "How? Did I never notice this?" Marlowe whispered, his coffee growing cold beside him. How did we all miss it? Marlowe remembered now. Zoe mentioning a boy who was being weird at school. He'd told her to talk to a teacher if it was serious. She'd shrugged it off, said she could handle it. Was Ryan Calloway that boy? And if so, what did it mean? Marlowe closed the yearbook and stared out the window at the darkening sky. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. A feeling he'd almost forgotten. He opened the yearbook again, this time with purpose. The questions tumbled through his mind faster than he could sort them. Had the police looked closely at Ryan Calloway? Marlowe tried to remember the days and weeks after Zoe disappeared, but much of that time was a blur of fear and desperation. He did remember Ryan being questioned. All of Zoe's classmates were, but Ryan had an alibi. He was working at Crandall's grocery the night Zoe vanished. Mr. Crandall himself confirmed it, along with 2 other employees. The police moved on to other leads that all turned cold. Marlowe grabbed his cell phone and called the only person who might understand what he was feeling. "Cooper," answered a gruff voice on the 3rd ring. "It's Marlowe Jenkins," he said. "I found something in Zoe's yearbook." A pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Detective Frank Cooper had been in charge of Zoe's case until his retirement 5 years ago. He'd kept in touch with Marlowe, checking in every few months. They weren't exactly friends. Their only connection was a missing girl. But they shared the burden of an unsolved mystery. While waiting for Cooper, Marlowe continued studying the yearbook. He found more photos with Ryan and Zoe. A pep rally where Ryan stood 2 people away from Zoe, watching her instead of the cheerleaders. A lunch table shot where Zoe sat with her friends and Ryan lurked in the background. The doorbell rang, just as Marlowe found one more photo. The drama club's backstage crew. Ryan and Zoe standing side by side, his shoulder touching hers. This time, Zoe wasn't just leaning away. Her face was turned from Ryan, her expression clearly uncomfortable. "This better be good, Jenkins," Cooper said as Marlowe let him in. At 68, Cooper was still a big man, though his dark hair had gone completely gray and his once muscular frame had softened. He followed Marlowe to the kitchen and sat heavily at the table. "It's Zoe's birthday," Marlowe said. Cooper nodded. "I know. 38 today." Marlowe pushed the yearbook toward Cooper, open to the sophomore class photo. "Look at her standing next to Ryan Calloway." Cooper pulled a pair of reading glasses from his shirt pocket and studied the photo. "What am I looking for?" His arm is around her waist. She's leaning away. Cooper made a non-committal noise. "Teenagers! Could mean anything." "There's more." Marlowe flipped through the yearbook, showing Cooper the other photos he'd found. He's always near her, always watching, and she never looks comfortable. Cooper's expression changed as he looked at each photo. "I remember questioning this kid. Quiet type. Had an alibi for the night Zoe disappeared. But did you ever look at him as anything more than just a classmate?" Cooper rubbed his chin. "We looked at everyone, Marlowe. We didn't find anything pointing to him." "But look at these photos. This isn't normal." Cooper studied the backstage crew photo carefully. "No," he said finally. "It isn't. Zoe mentioned a boy who was bothering her a few weeks before she disappeared," Marlowe said. "I didn't put it together until now, but I think she was talking about Ryan. Cooper took out a small notebook and pen from his pocket. Old habits died hard. What exactly did she say about this boy? Marlowe closed his eyes, trying to remember. She said he was being weird, following her around, asking her out even though she'd already said no. I told her to tell a teacher if it got worse. He opened, his eyes, the guilt fresh and sharp. I should have done more. Don't do that to yourself, Cooper said. You had no way of knowing. But now I do know something's not right. Ryan Calloway was stalking my daughter, and nobody noticed. Cooper held up a hand. Slow down. This is concerning, yes, but it doesn't prove anything. The boy had an alibi, remember? Alibis can be faked, Marlowe insisted. People lie. True, Cooper admitted. But we need more than some yearbook photos to go on. Marlowe felt the hope that had sparked earlier begin to fade. So, that's it? We just ignore this? Cooper closed the yearbook. I didn't say that. Tell you what, let me make some calls, see what I can find out about Ryan Calloway, where he is now, what he's been doing since high school. You'd do that? You're retired. Cooper's smile didn't reach his eyes. Zoe's case never let me go, Marlowe. You know that. It's why I check in on you. If there's even a chance we missed something. He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. I'll see what I can dig up. After Cooper left, Marlowe couldn't settle. The house felt too quiet, too empty. He paced from room to room, the yearbook clutched in his hand like a lifeline. By the time he reached Zoe's bedroom again, he'd made a decision. He wouldn't wait for Cooper's calls. He needed to know more about Ryan Calloway now. Marlowe sat at his computer in the small den off the living room and typed Ryan Calloway Pinewood into the search bar. Nothing useful came up. He tried adding more details. High school, 1990, Nevada, where Ryan had moved from, but still found nothing helpful. He sat back, frustrated. Lucas, his 19-year-old grandson, would know how to find someone online. But Lucas was away at college in California, and calling him would mean explaining everything to Veronica. Marlowe wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Not until he had more to go on. Instead, he picked up the phone and called the one person who might remember Ryan Calloway, Mrs. Waverly, next door. At 82, she had lived in her house since before Zoe was born and missed nothing that happened on New Cedar Street. Eleanor, it's Marlowe from next door. I have a question about Zoe. Oh, Marlowe. Mrs. Waverly's voice softened. I saw your lights on late. I was thinking about her today, too. Do you remember a boy named Ryan Calloway? He was in Zoe's class. There was a pause. The quiet boy with the dark hair? Moved here from out west somewhere? That's the one. I remember him, Mrs. Waverly said slowly. He used to drive that old blue Ford. Parked it across the street sometimes. Marlowe's pulse quickened. Parked across from our house? Yes, several times that spring before... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I thought maybe he and Zoe were dating, but she never invited him in. Did you ever mention this to the police? I don't think I did. Mrs. Waverly sounded troubled. It didn't seem important at the time. Just a boy with a crush, I thought. What about the night she disappeared? Did you see his car then? The silence stretched so long that Marlowe thought they'd been disconnected. Eleanor, are you there? I'm here, she said finally. And yes, now that you mention it, I did see that blue car that night. It was parked down the block, not directly across. I remember because it was raining, and I wondered why anyone would park so far from where they were visiting. Marlowe's hand tightened on the phone. "What time was this?" "Late. After 10. I was up with my arthritis. After 10. When Ryan Calloway was supposed to be working at Crandall's grocery." "Thank you, Eleanor," Marlowe said, his voice steadier than he felt. "You've been very helpful." After hanging up, Marlowe stared at the yearbook on his desk. The face of Ryan Calloway stared back, a boy on the edge of the frame, watching Zoe with eyes that now seemed darker, more menacing. The missing piece had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. Marlowe barely slept that night. He kept seeing Ryan Calloway's face, kept imagining the boy watching Zoe, following her, waiting for his chance. Every creak of the old house made him sit up in bed, half expecting to find Ryan standing in the shadows after all these years. By dawn, Marlowe had made up his mind. He needed to talk to Mrs. Waverly in person. Her memory of that night might be the key to reopening Zoe's case. He showered and dressed quickly, then headed next door with the yearbook tucked under his arm. The morning air was crisp with fall, and yellow leaves crunched under his feet as he walked the short path to Mrs. Waverly's front porch. She answered his knock with a smile that faded when she saw his serious expression. "You look like you haven't slept a wink, Marlowe." "I haven't," he admitted. "May I come in?" Mrs. Waverly's house was small but cozy, filled with plants and pictures of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The smell of cinnamon and coffee hung in the air. She led him to her kitchen table, where a half-finished crossword puzzle sat beside a mug of tea. "I've been thinking about our conversation," she said, pouring him a cup of tea he didn't want but accepted anyway. "About that boy and his car." "Ryan Calloway," Marlowe said, opening the yearbook to the sophomore class photo. "This boy right here." Mrs. Waverly put on her glasses and peered at the photo. "Yes, that's him. Such a serious-looking boy. Never smiled much that I recall. You said you saw his car the night Zoe disappeared. Are you certain it was his?" She nodded slowly. "It was that old blue Ford. Not many kids had a car like that. Most drove those little Japanese things." "And it was after 10 o'clock?" "Yes. I remember because my show had just ended, and I was making myself some warm milk for my arthritis. The Iowa kitchen window looks right out to the street, and I noticed the car because of the rain. It was coming down so hard, I wondered why anyone would park so far from where they were going." Marlowe leaned forward. "Did you see Ryan himself?" Mrs. Waverly frowned in concentration. "I didn't see him get out of the car. But later, maybe half an hour later, I saw someone walking back to it. A boy in a dark jacket with the hood up. I assumed it was him." "Did you tell the police about this when they were investigating Zoe's disappearance?" Mrs. Waverly looked down at her hands, twisted with arthritis. "I don't think I did. They asked if I'd seen anything unusual that night, but I didn't think of the car then. It wasn't until later, when I heard that boy had been questioned, that I remembered seeing his car. But by then, the police said he had an alibi, so I figured I must have been mistaken about the time." "You weren't mistaken," Marlowe said gently. "Ryan Calloway told the police he was working at Crandall's grocery until closing that night. The UAZ store closed at 10. He couldn't have been both at work and parked on our street at the same time." Mrs. Waverly's eyes widened. "Oh my, do you think—" "I don't know what to think yet," Marlowe said honestly. "But I need to find out." Mrs. Waverly reached across the table and patted his hand. Her skin felt paper-thin against his. "You know, there was something else about that boy. Something that bothered me." "What was it?" "Well, it wasn't just that night I saw his car. I saw it several times that spring, always parked across from your house. Usually in the afternoons when Zoe would be coming home from school. Once I saw him sitting there for over an hour. Marlowe felt a chill run through him. Did you ever see him speak to Zoe? Once. They were standing by his car. She looked upset, kept shaking her head no. He reached for her arm, but she pulled away and ran inside your house. I almost went over to check on her, but then I saw her bedroom light go on, so I knew she was safe. Why didn't you tell me this? Marlowe asked, trying to keep the accusation out of his voice. Mrs. Waverly looked ashamed. I'm not sure. It was a different time, Marlowe. We didn't talk about things like stalking the way people do now. I thought he was just a boy with a crush who didn't know how to take no for an answer. She shook her head. I should have said something. We all should have seen the signs, Marlowe said. I'm not blaming you. But part of him did blame her, just as he blamed himself. They had all failed to protect Zoe. They had all missed what was happening right under their noses. What will you do now? Mrs. Waverly asked. I'm going to call Detective Cooper and tell him what you've told me. Then I think it's time to find out what happened to Ryan Calloway after he left Pinewood. As Marlowe stood to leave, Mrs. Waverly caught his sleeve. If I had known, if I had said something back then. We can't change the past, Marlowe said, the words bitter in his mouth. But maybe we can finally get some answers. Walking back to his house, Marlowe felt a strange mixture of hope and dread. For 22 years, he had lived with not knowing. Now, he might finally learn the truth about what happened to Zoe. But as he reached for his phone to call Cooper, he wondered, was he ready for that truth? Marlowe's hand hovered over the phone. For 22 years, he had lived in a strange limbo. As long as Zoe's fate remained unknown, he could still hope. What if the truth was worse than not knowing? He took a deep breath and dialed Cooper's number. Hope or no hope, Zoe deserved justice. I was just about to call you, Cooper said when he answered. I've been making some calls about our friend Ryan Calloway. I need to talk to you, Marlowe said. Mrs. Waverly remembers more than she told the police back then. I'll be there in 30 minutes. While waiting for Cooper, Marlowe made a pot of coffee and tried to organize his thoughts. The revelations were coming too fast, stirring up emotions. He'd worked hard to bury over the years grief, anger, guilt. He'd spent so long focusing on the mystery of Zoe's disappearance that he'd almost forgotten the girl herself. Now memories flooded back. Zoe dancing around the kitchen to the radio, Zoe arguing fiercely with him about curfew, Zoe reading aloud from her favorite books using different voices for each character. When Cooper arrived, the old detective looked more alert than he had the day before. He carried a thick manila folder under one arm. Let's hear what Mrs. Waverly told you, Cooper said, settling at the kitchen table. Marlowe recounted his conversation with his neighbor, watching Cooper's expression darken. She's sure about the time? Cooper asked. After 10, when Ryan was supposed to be at work? She's sure. She remembers her TV show ending. Cooper rubbed his jaw. That's significant. His alibi was the backbone of why we ruled him out. He tapped the folder he'd brought. I pulled my personal copies of the case files this morning. You kept copies? Marlowe asked, surprised. Unofficial ones? Cooper gave a wry smile. Not exactly. By the book. But there were a few cases I couldn't let go of. Zoe's was at the top of the list. He opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. Here's the statement from Ryan's boss at Crandall's Grocery, Stan Crandall himself. He confirmed Ryan worked from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. the night Zoe disappeared. Cooper flipped to another page. And statements from 2 other employees, Kevin Wheaton and Martin Diller, backing that up. They could have been mistaken, Marlowe suggested. Or maybe Ryan snuck out. possible? Cooper nodded. Or they could have lied for him, though I can't imagine why they would. He pulled out a photograph. This is Ryan Calloway's high school photo. Marlowe studied the face. Dark hair, serious eyes, no smile. The same boy who lurked at the edges of Zoe's yearbook photos. I made some calls this morning, Cooper continued. After graduation, Ryan moved to Oregon, spent 3 years there, then moved to Washington State for 4 years, then Idaho for another 3. Currently lives in Arizona. Works as a delivery driver for a shipping company. He moves around a lot, Marlowe observed. He does. Nothing illegal in that, but it's a pattern worth noting. Cooper hesitated. There's something else. I called in a favor with a buddy who still has access to the national database. Ryan Calloway was questioned in connection with a stalking complaint in Washington, but charges were never filed. The girl withdrew her statement. Marlowe felt sick. So he did it again. We don't know that for sure, but it's concerning. Cooper pulled out more papers. I also went back through the original witness statements from Zoe's case. 3 of her friends mentioned she'd been uncomfortable around a boy who wouldn't leave her alone. They never named him directly, and we didn't press for details because it didn't seem relevant once we cleared all her classmates. It was relevant, Marlowe said, his voice rising. It was the most relevant thing of all. I know that now. Cooper's face showed his regret. We got tunnel vision, focused on where she was last seen, who she was last with. The classic stranger abduction scenario. We never seriously considered it might be someone who'd been watching her, planning for weeks. Marlowe stood up and paced the kitchen. What now? It's been 22 years. Even if Ryan Calloway did something to Zoe, how do we prove it after all this time? Cooper leaned back in his chair. First, we need to talk to Stan Crandall and the other employees who provided Ryan's alibi. See if their stories have changed with time. People often remember things differently years later, or they're more willing to admit they weren't completely truthful. Is Stan still around? Last Marlowe had heard, the old grocer had retired. Still kicking at 82. Lives in the senior apartments on Maple Street. I called this morning but got his voicemail. What about the others? Kevin and Martin? Kevin Wheaton still lives in Pinewood. Works at the hardware store now. Martin Diller moved to Seattle years ago, but I found a number for him. Haven't called yet. Marlowe sat back down, suddenly exhausted. This is really happening, isn't it? After all these years. One step at a time, Cooper cautioned. We're just following a lead. Don't get your hopes too high. But it was too late. For that, hope had already taken root in Marlowe's heart, growing stronger with each new piece of information. There's one more thing we should do, Cooper said, closing his folder. We should visit the place where Zoe was last seen, the high school. Maybe walking through it will jog some memories. Pinewood High School looked much the same as it had 22 years ago, though the football field had been renovated and a new wing added to the science building. Classes were in session as Marlowe and Cooper walked the grounds, their presence drawing curious looks from students passing between buildings. The drama room is this way, Marlowe said, leading Cooper around the back of the main building. Before Zoe disappeared, Marlowe had taught shop in a workshop on the other side of campus. He'd rarely had reason to visit the arts wing. The drama room was empty when they arrived. The teacher on lunch break. Old play posters decorated the walls, including one for Our Town from 1990, Zoe's last production. She was last seen leaving rehearsal, Cooper said, consulting his notes. November 12, 1990, around 8:30 p.m. She told her friend Amy she was walking home because you couldn't pick her up. I had a faculty meeting, Marlowe said, the guilt fresh even after all these years. It ran late. I tried calling to tell her, but this was before cell phones. She must have gotten tired of waiting. It wasn't your fault, Cooper said automatically, the same words he'd repeated countless times during the investigation. Marlowe didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the back door of the drama room, the one that led to the student parking lot. She would have gone out this way. They stepped outside. The parking lot was half full of student cars, so different from the ones that would have been there in 1990. According to the case file, no one saw her after she left this door, Cooper said. She never made it home, which is only a 20-minute walk. We searched every inch of the route. Marlowe closed his eyes, trying to picture that night. Rain pouring down. Zoe pulling up her hood, maybe running to stay dry. Did Ryan Calloway wait for her here? Or did he follow her from somewhere else? Cooper, Marlowe said suddenly, if Ryan was supposed to be working at Crandall's until 10, but Mrs. Waverly saw his car near our house after 10, and Zoe left rehearsal at 8:30. He didn't finish the thought. Cooper nodded grimly. Plenty of time for him to intercept her somewhere between here and your house. Marlowe opened his eyes and looked out at the rain-soaked parking lot, seeing not the cars of today's students, but the empty space where his daughter had vanished into the night. We're going to find out what happened to her, he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him, even if it takes another 22 years. Cooper put a hand on his shoulder. We will. But Marlowe, are you prepared for what we might find? Marlowe thought of Zoe's empty bedroom, preserved like a museum to a life cut short. He thought of the years of not knowing, of hoping against hope. I have to know the truth, he said finally. Whatever it is. The next morning, Marlowe met Cooper at the main office of Pinewood High School. The hallways were noisy with students rushing to their first classes, their energy a stark contrast to the heavy weight of the past that Marlowe carried. Dr. Tate said she'd meet us here, Cooper said, checking his watch. As if on cue, a woman, in her 50s, with short gray hair and kind eyes, approached them. Mr. Jenkins, Detective Cooper, I'm Catherine Tate, the principal. Marlowe recognized her immediately, though it had been years since they'd spoken. Ms. Tate, you were an English teacher when I taught here. She nodded with a sad smile. I remember. And I remember Zoe. She was in my freshman English class. She gestured toward her office. Please, come in. Dr. Tate's office was warm and inviting, with plants on the windowsill and student artwork on the walls. She closed the door and took a seat behind her desk. When you called about looking into Ryan Calloway's records, I pulled everything we still have, she said, placing a folder on her desk. It's been over 20 years, so some things may have been purged, but I found his transcript and enrollment paperwork. Marlowe leaned forward eagerly as Dr. Tate opened the folder. Ryan Calloway transferred to Pinewood in September 1989, the beginning of his sophomore year, she read. Prior to that, he attended Valley High School in Henderson, Nevada. Does it say why his family moved? Cooper asked. Dr. Tate scanned the papers. Nothing specific, just the standard transfer forms. She handed Cooper a photocopied transcript. This is what was sent from his previous school. Cooper studied it, his brow furrowing. Mostly B's and C's. A few disciplinary notes, tardiness, missing assignments. He looked up. Nothing that raises red flags. May I? Marlowe held out his hand, and Cooper passed him the transcript. Something about it bothered Marlowe, though he couldn't immediately pinpoint what. The school name, Valley High School, was printed at the top, with an address in Henderson, Nevada. The classes seemed standard for a freshman year. English 9, algebra, biology, world history, PE, and an elective woodshop class. Did you ever Meet Ryan's parents? Cooper asked Dr. Tate. I didn't. I was just a teacher then. The principal would have handled their enrollment meeting. She frowned. That would have been Principal Gurney, but he passed away 10 years ago. Is there anyone still on staff who might remember the Calloway family? Marlowe asked. Dr. Tate thought for a moment. Mrs. Winters in the guidance office has been here forever. She might remember. A phone call later, and Mrs. Winters joined them. The elderly guidance counselor peered at Ryan's photo in the yearbook Marlowe had brought. Oh, yes. I remember this boy, she said. Quiet, kept to himself. His mother was the only one who came to enroll him. She seemed nervous. Said they moved for her husband's job, but didn't give details. The boy never caused trouble that came to my attention, but he didn't make many friends either. Do you remember what his mother looked like? Cooper asked. Mrs. Winters closed her eyes, thinking. Thin woman. Blonde hair. Always looked tired. I only met her that one time. After Mrs. Winters left, Marlowe continued studying the transcript. Something isn't right about this, he said finally. What do you mean? Cooper asked. I can't put my finger on it. It just feels off somehow. Dr. Tate leaned forward. If you're concerned about the authenticity, I could try contacting Valley High School directly, see if they can verify his attendance. Would they still have records from that far back? Marlowe asked. It's worth a try, she said, reaching for her phone. While Dr. Tate made the call, Marlowe and Cooper waited in tense silence. After several minutes of being transferred from person to person, Dr. Tate finally got through to someone in the records department at Valley High School. Yes, I'm inquiring about a former student. Ryan Calloway would have attended in 1988-89. Yes, I'll hold. The wait seemed endless. Marlowe found himself holding his breath. I see, Dr. Tate said finally. And you're certain? Yes. Yes, I understand. Thank you for checking. She hung up and looked at them with wide eyes. They have no record of a Ryan Calloway ever attending Valley High School. The revelation hit Marlowe like a physical blow. He faked his transcript? It appears that way, Dr. Tate said. The woman I spoke with checked their archived records. No Ryan Calloway was enrolled during that time period. Cooper leaned forward. Is there any way to check if there was a Ryan Calloway at any high school in the Henderson area? Dr. Tate picked up the phone again. Let me try the school district office. This time, the wait was even longer. Dr. Tate explained the situation, was transferred, explained again, and finally got someone willing to help. They're checking all high schools in their district, she told Marlowe and Cooper while on hold. Eventually, the person came back on the line. Dr. Tate listened intently, asking a few questions and thanking the person before hanging up. There was a Ryan Calloway enrolled at Desert Springs High School in Henderson, not Valley High, she reported. He attended for just one semester before withdrawing. The clerk I spoke with said she would email me whatever records they still have. When will we get those? Marlowe asked. She said it might take a day or two to locate and scan the archived files. Cooper looked thoughtful. Why would Ryan or his parents lie about which school he attended? What were they hiding? Maybe there was a problem at his real school, Marlowe suggested. Something they didn't want following them to Pinewood. They didn't have to wait for the email. 20 minutes later, Dr. Tate's computer dinged with a new message. That was fast, she said, clicking to open it. The clerk found his file right away and… Oh my. What is it? Marlowe and Cooper asked, almost in unison. Dr. Tate turned her screen so they could see. Ryan Calloway was suspended twice from Desert Springs High, once for fighting and once for inappropriate behavior toward female student, possible stalking. Marlowe felt his chest tighten. He had a history of this. The girl's parents didn't press charges, Dr. Tate read from the report, but they requested a restraining order. Before it could be processed, the Calloway family withdrew Ryan from school and moved. They ran, Cooper said grimly. Then they lied about where he went to school when they enrolled him here. And no one checked, Dr. Tate added, looking disturbed. Our verification procedures are much stricter now, but back then... She shook her head. Marlowe stared at the screen, at the damning evidence of Ryan's past behavior. His family had helped him escape consequences once. Had they done it again after Zoe disappeared? We need to talk to Stan Crandall, Cooper said, echoing Marlowe's thoughts. Today, as they thanked Dr. Tate and left her office, Marlowe felt a strange mix of vindication and dread. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture he had both longed for and feared for 22 years. We should head to the senior apartments and talk to Stan Crandall, Cooper said, as they walked to the parking lot. Marlowe's phone rang before he could respond. The display showed Lucas' cell. "It's my grandson," Marlowe told Cooper before answering. "Lucas, everything okay?" "Hey, Grandpa," Lucas's voice came through. "Mom told me you found something about Aunt Zoe." She sounded worried. "What's going on?" Marlowe hesitated. He hadn't told Veronica anything yet, wanting more information before getting her hopes up. She must have heard from Mrs. Waverly. "I'm following up on some old information," Marlowe said carefully. "Nothing definite yet. Mom said you think you know who did it. Someone from Zoe's class? Lucas, I can't talk about this now. I'll call your mother later. I want to help, Grandpa. I'm good with computers, remember? If you have a name, I can look them up online. Find out where they are now. What they're doing." Marlowe paused. Lucas was studying computer science at UCLA. He'd helped Marlowe set up his own computer and was always talking about things Marlowe barely understood. Coding, algorithms, digital tracking. "Hold on," Marlowe told Lucas, then turned to Cooper. "My grandson wants to help. He says he can look up Ryan online." Cooper considered this. "We could use the help. There's only so much I can access as a retired detective." Marlowe put the phone back to his ear. "Lucas, the name is Ryan Calloway. He was in Zoe's class, moved to Pinewood in 1990 from Henderson, Nevada. We think he's living in Arizona now." "Got it. I'll call you back in a couple of hours." After hanging up, Marlowe and Cooper drove to Sunshine Acres, the senior living complex where Stan Crandall now lived. The former grocer answered his door on the third knock, looking much older than Marlowe remembered, but with the same bristly white eyebrows. "Marlowe Jenkins," Stan said in surprise. "And Frank Cooper. What brings you two here?" They sat in Stan's small living room as Cooper explained they were looking into Zoe's case again. Stan listened with a troubled expression. "That poor girl," he said when Cooper finished. "I think about her whenever I see her picture in the paper on the anniversary. Never any answers." He shook his head. "But I don't see how I can help." "We're interested in Ryan Calloway," Cooper said. "He worked for you back then." Stan's bushy eyebrows drew together. "The quiet boy? What about him? You told police he was working the night Zoe disappeared. November 12, 1990, from 4 p.m. until closing at 10 p.m. Stan nodded slowly. "If that's what I said, then that's what happened. I ran a tight ship at my store, kept good records of who worked when." "Are you absolutely certain Ryan was there the entire shift?" Cooper pressed. "Could he have left early? Taken a long break?" Stan's eyes narrowed. "What are you getting at? You think Ryan had something to do with what happened to Zoe?" "We're just following leads," Cooper said diplomatically, trying to verify information. Stan leaned back in his chair, thinking. It was a long time ago, but I remember we were short-staffed that night. Kevin called in sick, so it was just Martin and Ryan working with me. He frowned. Wait, that's not right. Kevin was there. It was Martin who called in sick. So it was you, Kevin, and Ryan? Cooper clarified. Yes, that sounds right. Monday, night. Not very busy because of the rain. I stayed in the office doing paperwork most of the evening. Ryan and Kevin handled the front. Did you actually see Ryan throughout his shift? Marlowe asked. With your own eyes? Stan looked uncomfortable. I must have, but I can't recall specific times. I trusted my boys. If Ryan was clocked in, he was working. Cooper leaned forward. Mr. Crandall, did you ever actually check if Ryan was in the store the entire night? Or did you just assume he was because he clocked in and out? Stan's face reddened. Now look here, I wouldn't have lied. To the police. If I said the boy was working, he was working. But you were in your office, Marlowe pressed. You didn't see him the whole time. Stan faltered. I suppose I didn't physically see him every minute. No, but Kevin would have said something if Ryan had disappeared during their shift. We'll need to talk to Kevin, Cooper said. Before Stan could respond, Marlowe's phone rang again. Lucas! Grandpa! His grandson said excitedly when Marlowe answered. I found a lot of stuff about Ryan Calloway. You're not going to believe this. Can you tell me quickly? We're in the middle of something. He's moved 5 times since leaving Pinewood. 3 years in Portland, 4 in Seattle, 3 in Boise, 2 in Albuquerque, and now he's in Phoenix. Works for Fast Track Shipping as a delivery driver. Anything else? Marlowe asked, aware of Cooper and Stan watching him intently. I found his social media. Not much there, but there's a photo from a company picnic last summer. I'm sending it. To you now. Check his neck, Grandpa. The necklace he's wearing. It looks like it could be... Marlowe's phone dinged with an incoming message. He opened it to find a photo of a group of people at a picnic. Lucas had zoomed in on one man, older, heavier, but unmistakably Ryan Calloway. Around his neck was a thin silver chain with a small pendant identical to the one on Zoe's necklace, the family heirloom she never took off. I need to go, Marlowe told Lucas, his voice strangled. I'll call you back. He showed the photo to Cooper, whose eyes widened in recognition. What? Is it? Stan asked, confused by their reaction. Cooper turned to him grimly. Mr. Crandall, we need Kevin Wheaton's address, right now. Stan Crandall gave them Kevin's address at the Pine Ridge Apartments across town. As soon as they left Stan's place, Marlowe called Lucas again. Tell me everything you found on Ryan Calloway, he demanded, putting the phone on speaker so Cooper could hear as he drove. I tracked his employment history through public records, Lucas explained. He never stays at one job more than 4 years. Always similar positions: delivery driver, warehouse worker, night security. Jobs where he works mostly alone. What about the necklace? Cooper asked. Are there other photos of him wearing it? I found 3 more pictures. It's the same necklace in all of them, going back at least 5 years. It has a small silver pendant, shaped like a half-moon. Didn't Aunt Zoe have a necklace like that? It was her grandmother's, Marlowe confirmed, his voice tight. She wore it every day. Grandpa, Lucas said hesitantly. Mom called again. She's really worried. Says you're going down a rabbit hole that's only going to hurt you more. Marlowe sighed. Veronica had been through this before. The false leads, the raised hopes, the crushing disappointment. He couldn't blame her for wanting to protect herself and him from more pain. Tell your mother I'll call her tonight, Marlowe promised. There's one more thing, Lucas added. Ryan Calloway's current address in Phoenix. I found it online. He gave them the address. What are you going to do? Marlowe looked at Cooper, who gave a small nod. We're going to Arizona, Marlowe told his grandson. After hanging up, they drove to Kevin Wheaton's apartment. Kevin had been 17 when Zoe disappeared, a gangly boy who bagged groceries at Crandall's. Now, he was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a slight paunch, who looked startled to find Marlowe and Cooper at his door. Mr. Jenkins? What's this about? Kevin asked, letting them into his cramped living room. Cooper explained they were looking into Zoe's case again. We need to ask about the night she disappeared. You were working at Crandall's with Ryan Calloway. Kevin's expression changed, a flicker of something, fear, guilt, crossing his face. That was forever ago. I barely remember it. Try, Marlowe urged. It's important. Kevin sank onto his sofa. What do you want to know? Was Ryan Calloway at the store the entire shift that night? Cooper asked bluntly. From 4 p.m. to 10 p.m.? Kevin stared at his hands. I told the police he was. But was he really? Marlowe pressed. Kevin was silent for a long moment. No, he finally admitted. He left around 7:30, said he wasn't feeling well, asked me to cover for him. And you did, Cooper said. It wasn't a question. Kevin nodded miserably. He came back around 9:45, just before closing. His clothes were wet from the rain. He made me promise not to tell Mr. Crandall he'd been gone. Why? Marlowe asked. Why would you lie for him? He paid me $20, Kevin said, his voice small with shame. I was saving for a car. Didn't seem like a big deal at the time. When the police came asking questions after Zoe disappeared, why didn't you tell them the truth? Cooper demanded. Kevin's face crumpled. By then, I was scared. Ryan came to my house before the police interviewed me. Said if I told them he'd left early, he'd get fired. Said he'd been helping his mom with something, and it had nothing to do with that missing girl. He looked up, his eyes pleading. I was just a kid. I never thought he might have. Did Ryan ever mention Zoe? Marlowe asked. Did he talk about her? Kevin nodded reluctantly. He was obsessed with her, always watching her at school. He'd come into work talking about what she wore that day, who she talked to. He shuddered. It was creepy, but I figured it was just a crush. What about that night, when he came back to the store? Cooper leaned forward. Did he say where he'd been? Did you notice anything unusual? Kevin closed his eyes, thinking back. His hair was wet. His clothes, too. He changed into his spare uniform shirt because the one he was wearing was soaked through. And he seemed different, jumpy, kept looking out the windows. Anything else? Marlowe urged. His hands were scratched up. I asked what happened, and he said he fell in the rain. Kevin opened his eyes. And he had a necklace, a silver one with a moon pendant. It was hanging out of his pocket. I asked if it was his girlfriend's, and he got really mad, shoved it back in his pocket, and told me to mind my own business. Marlowe felt lightheaded. Zoe's necklace. Ryan had it the night she disappeared. Are you okay, Mr. Jenkins? Kevin asked, noticing Marlowe's pallor. Kevin, Cooper said, his voice gentle but firm. Would you be willing to make an official statement about all this? It could help us finally solve what happened to Zoe. Kevin nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry. I should have said something years ago. I just never thought. I never wanted to believe Ryan could have hurt her. Back in the car, Marlowe sat in stunned silence as Cooper made calls to the current Pinewood detective handling cold cases. When he finished, Cooper turned to Marlowe. "Detective Rivera wants to talk to Kevin. She's going to reopen the case based on this new evidence. But Marlowe, this will take time. The police will need to build a case, get a warrant to question Ryan, search his home." "We don't have time," Marlowe said. "What if he runs again? He's been running his whole life." "What are you suggesting?" "We go to Arizona, find him ourselves." Cooper stared at him. "That's not a good idea. We should let the police handle this. It's been 22 years, Frank. 22 years of not knowing what happened to my little girl. If Ryan Calloway has answers, I need to hear them directly, from him. And what will you do when you find him? Confront him? That could be dangerous. It could also jeopardize any case the police might build." "I just need to see him, to look him in the eye." Marlowe's voice broke. "I need to know if he's the one who took Zoe from me." Cooper was silent for a long moment. "You're going no matter what I say, aren't you?" "Yes." "Then I'm coming with you." Cooper sighed. "Let me make some arrangements. We'll leave tomorrow morning." Marlowe nodded, already mentally packing. "I should call Veronica." The conversation with his ex-wife went exactly as he expected. She accused him of chasing ghosts, of reopening wounds that had never fully healed. "You do this every few years, Marlowe," she said, her voice tired. "You think you've found a new lead, and it always ends the same way." "This is different," he insisted. "We have evidence now. The necklace, Ryan's alibi falling apart, his history of stalking. And what if—" "You're right," Veronica challenged. "What if Ryan did something to Zoe? Are you prepared for what that means? For finding out she's really gone?" "I need to know the truth," Marlowe said simply. A long silence followed. "Be careful," Veronica finally said, "and call me when you get there." The next morning, Cooper picked Marlowe up at 6. They loaded their overnight bags into Cooper's sedan and began the long drive to Arizona. As they left Pinewood behind, Marlowe watched the familiar landmarks fade in the rearview mirror. The town where he'd lived his entire life. The town where his daughter had vanished without a trace. "We're coming, Zoe," he whispered. "We're finally coming." The drive to Phoenix took 14 hours, with stops only for gas, food, and restroom breaks. Cooper and Marlowe took turns driving, speaking little. Both men were lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. As they crossed the Arizona state line, Marlowe felt a mix of exhaustion and nervous energy. They were getting closer to answers, but what kind of answers would they be? And was he truly ready to hear them? "We should stop for the night," Cooper suggested as they approached Phoenix. "Get some rest before we find Ryan." They checked into a roadside motel on the outskirts of the city. Despite his exhaustion, Marlowe barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Zoe's face. Not as she had been in the yearbook photos, young and full of promise, but as she might be now at 38 if she had somehow survived. Morning came too soon. Over breakfast at a diner next to the motel, Cooper laid out his plan. "First, we locate his house and do some surveillance," he said, stirring his coffee. "We need to understand his routine before we make any moves." "What if he spots us?" Marlowe asked. "We'll be careful. I did this for 30 years, remember?" Cooper tried to smile, but his eyes remained serious. "Marlowe, we need to talk about what happens when we find him. I know what you're going to say. We can't just confront him. If he really did something to Zoe, he's dangerous. And if we spook him, he might run again." Marlowe nodded reluctantly. "So what do? We watch. We gather information. Then we call Detective Rivera and let her take it from there." Cooper leaned forward. "Promise me you won't do anything rash." Marlowe thought of the necklace Ryan wore, the one that had belonged to Zoe's grandmother. He thought of the lies, the convenient alibi, the history of stalking. His anger threatened to overwhelm him. "I promise to try," he said, finally. Cooper seemed to accept that was the best he would get. "Let's go." They found Ryan's house easily enough with the address Lucas had provided. It was a small, plain house on the outskirts of Phoenix, painted a dusty beige that blended with the desert landscape. A gravel driveway led to a carport where a dark blue pickup truck was parked. Cooper drove past the house slowly, then parked on a side street with a clear view of Ryan's driveway. They didn't have to wait long. At 7:30 a.m., Ryan emerged from the house wearing a brown uniform with the Fast Track Shipping logo. Marlowe's heart pounded as he got his first real look at Ryan Calloway in 22 years. The lanky teenager from the Yearbook had grown into a thick-set man in his late 30s. His dark hair was thinning, and he moved with a slight stoop. If Marlowe had passed him on the street, he might not have recognized him. But when Ryan turned to lock his door, the sun caught something around his neck. A flash of silver. "The necklace," Marlowe whispered, his hands clenching into fists. "Easy," Cooper cautioned. "We're just watching today." They followed Ryan at a safe distance as he drove to a fast-track depot, where he picked up a delivery truck. For the next 8 hours, they trailed him on his route, keeping well back to avoid detection. "He's been doing this same job in different cities for years," Cooper observed. "Always on the move, always alone." When Ryan finished his deliveries and returned the truck to the depot, they followed him to a small bar called the Roadrunner. He went inside while they waited in the car. "What do you think he's hiding from?" Marlowe asked. Cooper shook his head. "Could be guilt. Could be fear of being caught. Or maybe he just can't form connections because of whatever happened." 2 hours. Later, Ryan emerged from the bar and drove home. He didn't come out again. "That seems to be his routine," Cooper said as they returned to their motel. "Work, bar, home. Same thing tomorrow, I expect." "So when do we approach him?" Cooper thought for a moment. "Not at his house. Too private. Too many things could go wrong. Not at work, either. Too many witnesses. The bar might be our best bet. Neutral territory with other people around." "Tomorrow, then," Marlowe said, the weight of 22 years pressing down on him. "Tomorrow," Cooper agreed. "But Marlowe, we need to be smart about this. If he's guilty, he'll deny everything. We can't let on how much we know." That night, Marlowe called Veronica as promised. "We found him," he told her. "We're going to talk to him tomorrow." "Be careful," she urged. "If he really did hurt Zoe—" "I know." A long pause followed. "Marlowe, whatever happens, whatever you find out, I want you to know I'm here. We'll face it together." The words meant more to Marlowe than he could express. After all these years, all the pain and separation, the one thing that still connected them was their love for their daughter. "Thank you," he managed. "Call me after," she said before hanging up. Marlowe lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling of the motel room. Tomorrow he would face the man who might have taken his daughter's life. The man who had been wearing her necklace for years. The man whose lies had helped ensure Zoe's disappearance remained unsolved. What would he see in Ryan Calloway's eyes? Guilt? Fear? Or the cold emptiness of someone capable of erasing a 16-year-old girl from the world? "I'm here, Zoe," he whispered into the darkness. "I'm not giving up." Morning came with a blazing Arizona sun. Marlowe and Cooper waited outside Ryan's house, watching as he left for work at the same time as before. They followed him to the depot, Then to his first few deliveries before Cooper pulled into a gas station. "We know his routine now," Cooper said. "He won't be home until after 5, won't be at the bar until around 6. So, what do we do until then?" Marlowe asked. Cooper stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. "There's something I think we should do. Something not exactly by the book." Marlowe raised his eyebrows. "What are you suggesting?" "His house will be empty all day." Cooper turned to face him. "If there's evidence connecting him to Zoe, it might be inside. You want to break in?" Marlowe was stunned. Cooper had always been a by-the-book cop. "I'm not a cop anymore," Cooper said, as if reading his thoughts. "This isn't official. This is for Zoe." He sighed. "Look, I know it's not legal, but if we find something, it could help the police build a real case against him." Marlowe thought about it. What if he has security cameras? An alarm system? We drove around the property. Yesterday, no visible cameras. These older houses in this area rarely have alarm systems. Cooper grimaced. "I'm not proud of suggesting this, but we've waited 22 years for answers. I don't want to wait any longer, and I don't think you do either." "Let's do it," Marlowe said without further hesitation. They drove back to Ryan's neighborhood, but parked several streets away. Cooper had brought a small bag with him from the motel. As they walked toward Ryan's house, he explained his plan. "We'll go around to the back. Most people don't lock their back doors as securely as their front. If it's locked, I know how to get in without leaving obvious signs of a break-in." "Where did you learn that?" Marlowe asked. "You pick things up after 30 years in law enforcement," Cooper said with a grim smile. "Sometimes you need to get into places quickly during an investigation." Ryan's house stood on a quarter-acre lot with no immediate neighbors. A chain-link fence surrounded the backyard, but the gate wasn't locked. They slipped through and approached the back door. Cooper tried the handle. Locked. He pulled some tools from his bag and worked on the lock while Marlowe kept watch. Within minutes, they were inside. The house was eerily neat and impersonal. The living room contained a couch, a TV, and not much else. No photos on the walls, no books on shelves, no signs of hobbies or interests. The kitchen was similarly sparse. Basic appliances, a small table with 2 chairs, minimal cookware. "It's like a hotel room," Marlowe observed. "Not a home." "Let's split up," Cooper suggested. "You take the living room and kitchen. I'll check the bedroom and bathroom. Look for anything that might connect to Zoe or to Pinewood." Marlowe searched methodically through drawers and cabinets in the kitchen, finding nothing of interest. The living room was equally unrevealing. No personal papers, no mementos, just the basics needed for day-to-day living. "Cooper," he called, softly, after 20 minutes of searching. "I'm not finding anything." "Come here," Cooper's voice came from the bedroom. "You need to see this." Marlowe found Cooper standing in front of an open closet. Inside, on the top shelf, was a wooden chest, about 2 feet long. "It's locked," Cooper said, lifting it down, "and it's the only thing in this entire house that seems personal." The chest was made of dark wood with metal corners. A small lock kept it closed. "Can you open it?" Marlowe asked. Cooper examined the lock. "It's simple. Give me a minute." While Cooper worked on the lock, Marlowe looked around the bedroom. Like the rest of the house, it was sparsely furnished. A bed, a dresser, a nightstand with a lamp. No personal touches. "Got it," Cooper said, as the lock clicked open. They both held their breath as Cooper lifted the lid. Inside the chest were several high school yearbooks. Cooper took them out one by one. They were from different schools across the country: Pinewood High, West Portland High, Lakeside High in Seattle, Mountain View High in Boise, and Desert Valley High in Albuquerque. He kept yearbooks from every place he's lived, Marlowe said, taking the Pinewood one and opening it. What he saw made his blood run cold. In the sophomore class photos, Zoe's picture had been circled in red marker. But she wasn't the only one. A girl in the junior class was circled too, and another in the freshman class. Cooper was looking through the other yearbooks. "They're all the same," he said grimly. "Each one has girls circled in them, 1 or 2 per yearbook." "What does it mean?" Marlowe asked, though he feared he already knew. "I don't know yet." Cooper continued searching the chest and pulled out a small velvet bag from a hidden compartment in the bottom. He emptied its contents onto the bed. Small pieces of jewelry spilled out: a charm bracelet, a pair of small hoop earrings, a class ring, a beaded hair clip, and most damning of all, Zoe's silver necklace with the moon pendant. "My God," Marlowe whispered, picking up the necklace with shaking hands. "This is Zoe's. Her grandmother gave it to her for her 13th birthday. She never took it off." Cooper looked grim. "These are trophies, Marlowe, each one from a different girl. Look at the class ring." He pointed to an inscription on the inside. "Jessica L., 1993. That matches one of the circled girls in the Portland yearbook." Marlowe felt sick. He's been doing this for years, not just Zoe. He held the necklace tight in his fist. "We need to call the police." "We will," Cooper assured him. "But we need to be careful about how we explain how we found this. Breaking in could jeopardize the case." Before Marlowe could respond, they heard a sound that froze them both. A car pulling into the driveway. Cooper quickly stuffed everything back into the chest, except for Zoe's necklace, which Marlowe refused to part with. They crept to the front window and peered out. Ryan's blue pickup was parked in the driveway. "He's back early," Cooper whispered. "He must have finished his route faster than normal." "What do we do?" Marlowe asked, panic rising. Cooper thought quickly. "Back door, now." Quietly, they moved through the house silently, hearing the key in the front door just as they slipped out the back. They hurried across the yard and through the gate, not slowing until they were several blocks away. "That was close," Cooper said as they reached their car. "Too close." Marlowe opened his hand and looked at Zoe's necklace, the silver gleaming in the sunlight. "We found it," he said, his voice breaking. "After all these years." "Yes," Cooper agreed, putting a hand on Marlowe's shoulder. "And now we need to make sure he pays for what he did." "The bar," Marlowe said firmly. "Tonight, we end this." Back at Tuanfi, the motel, Cooper called Detective Rivera in Pinewood, while Marlowe sat on the edge of the bed, Zoe's necklace clutched in his hand. He could hear Cooper explaining what they'd found, carefully omitting how they'd obtained the evidence. "She wants us to wait," Cooper said after hanging up. "She's contacting the Phoenix police to get a search warrant for Ryan's house. Says they'll send officers to pick him up for questioning." "How long will that take?" Marlowe asked. "Could be hours. Could be tomorrow." Cooper sat beside him. "She specifically asked us not to approach Ryan." Marlowe opened his hand, looking at the silver necklace with its half-moon pendant. 22 years, he said softly. 22 years of not knowing. "I can't wait any longer, Frank." Cooper sighed, his shoulders sagging. "I figured you'd say that. If we're doing this, we need a plan. We can't just walk up and accuse him." "I want to know what happened to Zoe," Marlowe said. "I want to hear it from him. He won't just confess. Men like Ryan don't work that way. Then we make him uncomfortable enough to slip up." Marlowe's voice hardened. "We make him feel what Zoe must have felt, trapped, with no way out." They spent the rest of the afternoon planning their approach. By the time they left the motel, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. "Remember," Cooper said as they drove toward the Roadrunner. "We're just there to talk. No accusations right away. We get him comfortable first, then start asking questions." Marlowe nodded, though his mind was filled with all the things he wanted to say to Ryan Calloway, all the rage he'd kept bottled up for 22 years. The Roadrunner was a typical roadside bar. Dim lighting, country music playing from a jukebox, a handful of patrons scattered at tables and along the bar. Ryan sat alone at the far end, nursing a beer, his back to the wall. "There he is," Cooper murmured. "Let me do the talking at first." They approached slowly. Ryan didn't notice them until they were standing right in front of him. When he looked up and saw Marlowe, his eyes widened in recognition, then quickly shuttered. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice neutral, as if Marlowe were a stranger. "Mind if we join you?" Cooper asked, sliding onto a stool beside him before he could answer. Marlowe took the seat on Ryan's other side, effectively boxing him in. Ryan glanced between them, his face carefully blank. "Do I know you?" "I think you do," Marlowe said quietly. "At least you know me." A flicker of something, fear, wariness, crossed Ryan's face. "I'm sorry. You must have me confused with someone else." "I don't think so," Cooper interjected smoothly. "Pinewood High, class of '92. You were a sophomore when you moved there in 1990. Worked at Crandall's grocery after school." Ryan's fingers tightened around his beer glass. "That was a long time ago." "Not so long that you'd forget," Marlowe said. "Not so long that I'd forget either." Ryan's eyes darted toward the door, calculating his chances of escape. Cooper shifted slightly, blocking the path. "Why don't we all just calm down?" Ryan said, forcing a smile. "What's this about?" Marlowe placed the yearbook on the bar between them, open to the sophomore class photo. "I found something interesting recently," he said, his voice steady despite the anger churning inside him. "When I looked at this old yearbook, I noticed how you always managed to be near my daughter in the photos, how she always seemed uncomfortable around you." Ryan stared at the yearbook, his face paling slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," Cooper said. "We also talked to Kevin Wheaton. Remember him? Your co-worker at Crandall's?" Ryan's expression flickered at the name. "Vaguely." "He told us an interesting story," Cooper continued. "About the night Zoe Jenkins disappeared. About how you weren't actually at work the whole time, despite what you told police. How you paid him to lie for you." "You broke into my house," Ryan said suddenly, his voice cold. "That's illegal." "We don't know what you're talking about," Marlowe said, echoing Ryan's earlier denial. "But it's interesting that's where your mind went." Ryan glanced around the bar, then leaned forward. "You can't prove anything. It was over 20 years ago." "What can't we prove, Ryan?" Cooper pressed. "That you left work early? That you followed Zoe? That you took her necklace as a trophy? Just like you took jewelry from other girls in other towns?" Ryan's calm facade began to crack. "You broke into my house," he repeated, his voice rising slightly. "You can't use anything you found." "We're not police," Cooper said with a small shrug. "Just a retired cop and a father looking for answers about his daughter." "I didn't hurt her," Ryan insisted, his eyes darting between them. "I loved her." Marlowe felt his control slipping. "Loved her? You stalked her. You terrified her." Ryan's face changed, hardened. "She didn't understand. No one did. We were meant to be together." "Where is she, Ryan?" Marlowe asked, his voice breaking despite his best efforts. "What did you do to my daughter?" Ryan looked around the bar again, then leaned closer. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he whispered. It was an accident. Marlowe's heart felt like it stopped. After 22 years of hoping, of wondering, the truth was finally coming. "What happened?" Cooper asked gently, taking over when Marlowe couldn't speak. Ryan stared at the yearbook, at Zoe's smiling face. "She was going to run away with me," he said, his voice distant. "That's what was supposed to happen. But then she changed her mind." Marlowe's hands clenched into fists under the bar. Cooper gave him a warning look before turning back to Ryan. "Tell us what happened that night," Cooper urged gently, as if coaxing a frightened animal. Ryan took a long drink of his beer, his eyes never leaving Zoe's photo. "I left work early, told Kevin I was sick, but I was really going to meet Zoe. We had it all planned out." "Planned what?" Cooper asked when Ryan fell silent. "Our life together." Ryan's voice took on a dreamy quality. "I had money saved. We were going to drive to California, start over where no one knew us. She was unhappy at home, you know. She told me so." Marlowe bit his tongue so hard he tasted blood. This was a lie, a delusion. Zoe had been happy. She'd had friends, activities, plans for the future that never included Ryan Calloway. "So you met her after her drama rehearsal?" Cooper prompted. Ryan nodded. "I waited in my car near the school. When I saw her walking, I pulled up beside her. She got in." He frowned. "But something was wrong. She was acting strange, nervous, said she'd changed her mind, didn't want to go with me after all." "What did you do then?" Cooper asked quietly. "I tried to explain how perfect we'd be together, how I'd take care of her. But she wouldn't listen." Ryan's fingers tightened around his glass. "She tried to get out of the car while I was driving. I grabbed her arm to stop her, and she hit me." His voice hardened. "After everything I'd done for her, all the plans I'd made, she hit me." Marlowe felt sick. The image of Zoe, frightened, trying to escape, was almost more than he could bear. "We were arguing," Ryan continued. "I pulled over near the old hiking trail just outside of town. I needed her to understand we were meant to be together. She got out of the car, started running into the woods. I followed her." He paused, his expression clouding. "It was raining so hard. The ground was slippery. She fell." "She fell," Cooper repeated, his tone neutral. "Hit her head on a rock. There was a lot of blood." Ryan swallowed hard. "I tried to help her, but she wasn't moving. I panicked." "So you buried her," Marlowe said, unable to stay silent any longer. Ryan's eyes snapped to his, as if remembering who he was talking to. "It was an accident," he insisted. "I never meant to hurt her. I loved her." "Where?" Marlowe demanded, his voice breaking. "Where did you leave her?" Ryan looked down at his hands. "In the woods, near the creek. I dug as deep as I could with my hands, but the ground was so wet." He trailed off. "I took her necklace to remember her by. Something special. Something that connected us." Cooper placed a restraining hand on Marlowe's arm, feeling the tension there. "You need to show us exactly where, Ryan. Help bring Zoe home." Ryan's eyes darted to the door again. "I can't go back to Pinewood. People would know. They'd blame me, even though it was an accident." "You've been running for 22 years, Cooper said. "Moving from town to town? What about the other girls? The ones in your yearbooks? Were those accidents too?" Something dark flickered across Ryan's face. "I never hurt anyone else. I just watched. Found girls who reminded me of Zoe. Took small things to remember them by, but I never hurt them." Marlowe didn't believe him. Neither, clearly, did Cooper. whose expression had hardened. "You need to come with us back to Pinewood," Cooper said firmly. "Show us where Zoe is. It's time to end." "This, Ryan?" Ryan looked cornered, his eyes wild. "I can't," he whispered. "My life would be over." "Your life?" Marlowe could no longer contain his rage. "What about my daughter's life? The one you took? What about all the birthdays, graduations, weddings she'll never have? What about the grandchildren I'll never meet?" "It was an accident," Ryan snapped, louder this time. A few bar patrons glanced their way. Cooper leaned in. "Keep your voice down. You have two choices here, Ryan. Come with us voluntarily to Pinewood, tell the police what happened, show them where Zoe is, or we call the Phoenix police right now and tell them about the collection of stolen jewelry in your house, the stalking, patterns documented in your yearbooks." "You broke in," Ryan hissed. "That evidence wouldn't hold up." "Maybe not," Cooper conceded. "But it would be enough for a search warrant. And once they find what we found, there will be questions you can't answer. Jewelry from multiple states, all connected to young women. That looks a lot like serial offending, Ryan. That's not just a tragic accident anymore." Fear spread across Ryan's face. "What do you want from me?" "The truth," Marlowe said simply. "And for you to show us where my daughter is." Ryan stared at his empty glass for a long moment. When he looked up, his expression had changed, as if he'd made a decision. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll take you to her. But I need to go home first. Get some things for the trip." Cooper shook his head. "No, we leave now. We can stop for whatever you need on the way." "You don't understand," Ryan insisted. "I have medication I need to take. Important papers. Please, just a quick stop at my house. Then we'll drive straight to Pinewood." Cooper and Marlowe exchanged glances. "We go with you," Cooper said firmly. "You don't leave our sight." Ryan nodded, a strange calm settling over him. "Of course. Let's get this over with." As they left the bar, Marlowe clutched Zoe's necklace in his pocket. After 22 years, he was finally going to bring his daughter home. But the hollow victory gave him no peace, only a deep, aching sadness for all that had been lost. Charu. Night air was cool as they walked to the parking lot. Ryan between them like a prisoner being escorted, though no official arrest had been made. "We'll take my car," Cooper said firmly. "Ryan, you'll sit in the back." Ryan nodded, surprisingly compliant. "My house is just 5 minutes from here." They drove in tense silence. Marlowe kept his eyes on Ryan in the rearview mirror, watching for any sign of deception or an attempt to escape. Ryan sat quietly, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. When they arrived at Ryan's house, Cooper laid down the rules. 10 minutes, we come in with you. You gather what you need, and we leave. Understand?" "I understand," Ryan said softly. Inside, Ryan headed straight for the bathroom. "I need to get my medication," he explained. Cooper followed him while Marlowe waited in the living room, the necklace still clutched in his hand. Through the thin walls, Marlowe could hear cabinets opening and closing. After a few minutes, Ryan and Cooper emerged, Ryan carrying a small toiletry bag. "I just need to get some clothes and my wallet," Ryan said, moving toward the bedroom. Again, Cooper followed closely. Marlowe heard drawers sliding open, the rustle of clothing being packed. "Let's go," Cooper said when they returned, Ryan now carrying a small duffel bag along with the toiletry bag. Back in the car, they headed for the interstate. Marlowe called Detective Rivera to update her while Cooper drove, and Ryan sat silently in the back seat. "We're bringing him back to Pinewood," Marlowe explained. "He's agreed to show us where he buried Zoe." "This is not how we handle things, Marlowe," Rivera's voice was tight with frustration. "You should have waited. You could be putting yourselves in danger." "We'll meet you at the trail entrance off Old Mill Road," Marlowe said, ignoring her concerns. "That's where he says it happened." After hanging up, Marlowe called Veronica. "We found him," he said simply. "He confessed to being with Zoe that night. Says it was an accident, that she hit her head while trying to get away from him." Veronica's quiet sob tore at his heart. "You always said you'd find her," she whispered. "We're bringing her home, Veronica. Finally bringing her home." "I'm coming to Pinewood," she said, her voice steadying. "I'll be on the first flight out." The long drive back to Pinewood was mostly silent. Occasionally, Cooper would ask Ryan questions about that night, filling in details of the timeline. Ryan answered in a detached way, as if talking about someone else's actions. "How did you know Zoe would be walking home that night?" Cooper asked as they crossed the state line into Nevada. "I overheard her talking to her friend after school," Ryan replied. "Said her dad had a meeting and couldn't pick her up. I knew she'd be alone." Marlowe gripped the dashboard, each new detail like a knife to his heart. As the miles passed, Marlowe's mind filled with memories of Zoe, her first steps, her first day of school, the way she laughed with her whole body, how she'd curl up next to him on the couch to watch movies, even as a teenager when most kids her age would have found it uncool. Around dawn, they stopped for gas and coffee. Cooper never let Ryan out of his sight, following him even to the restroom door. "How are you holding up?" Cooper asked Marlowe quietly while Ryan was washing his hands. "I don't know," Marlowe admitted. "Part of me is grateful we'll finally know where she is. The other part—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Cooper squeezed his shoulder. "I know. It's the closure you needed, but not the outcome you hoped for. Even after all these years, there's always that tiny spark of hope." They were back on the road when Marlowe's phone rang. It was Detective Rivera again. "We've got a team assembled," she said. "Forensic specialists, search and recovery experts. We'll meet you at the trailhead in 3 hours." When Marlowe hung up, Ryan spoke from the back seat, his first words in hours. "They won't find anything, you know." Marlowe turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" A strange smile played at the corners of Ryan's mouth. "The creek. It flooded. That spring, remember? Washed everything away." "You're lying," Marlowe said, his voice shaking. "You're just trying to hurt me more." Ryan shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. Guess we'll find out." Cooper shot Ryan a warning look in the rearview mirror. "Enough. Just tell us exactly where you left her." "I will," Ryan said, leaning back against the seat. "I'm just saying, don't get your hopes up about finding much after 22 years. As they approached Pinewood, familiar landmarks appeared. The water tower painted with the town name, the old drive-in theater that had closed years ago, the sign for Pinewood High School. Marlowe felt a surreal disconnect, bringing his daughter's killer back to the town where it all happened. They turned onto Old Mill Road, following it to the end where a small parking area marked the trailhead. Several police vehicles were already waiting, along with a van from the medical examiner's office. Detective Rivera, a stern-looking woman in her 40s, approached as they parked. "Mr. Jenkins, Mr. Cooper," she nodded to them before turning, her attention to Ryan as he stepped out of the car. "Mr. Calloway, I'm Detective Rivera. You're going to show us where Zoe Jenkins is buried, and then you'll be coming to the station for formal questioning." Ryan looked at the assembled team: police officers, forensic technicians, search experts with equipment. His face paled slightly. "It was an accident," he said, his voice suddenly small. "You have to believe me." No one responded to his plea. Instead, Detective Rivera instructed an officer to stay with Ryan while she spoke privately with Marlowe and Cooper. "What you two did was dangerous and could have compromised our case," she said firmly. "But I understand why you did it." Her expression softened slightly. "Let's find her, Mr. Jenkins. Let's bring your daughter home." The search team gathered around as Ryan was instructed to lead them to the spot where he had buried Zoe. 2 officers flanked him as they started down the hiking trail, with Marlowe, Cooper, and Detective Rivera following close behind. The rest of the team came after them, carrying equipment. The trail wound through tall pines and oaks, dappled morning sunlight filtering through the branches. It was a beautiful, peaceful place that seemed at odds with the grim purpose of their journey. After about 20 minutes of walking, Ryan stopped. "We left the trail here," he said, pointing to a barely visible break in the underbrush. "Followed the creek downstream." The officers made him go first, crashing through brambles and fallen branches. The creek came into view, a modest stream flowing over smooth stones. In spring, with heavy rains, Marlowe could imagine it swelling to several times its current size. Ryan walked along the creek bank for another few minutes before stopping again. He looked around, frowning in concentration. It was here, or maybe a little further. He moved a few more yards downstream. Yes, here. She fell on these rocks. He pointed to a collection of stones at the edge of the creek. "I buried her just up the bank, under that big oak tree." The search team moved into action, setting up a grid and beginning to scan the area with ground-penetrating radar. Marlowe stood back, watching, the necklace still clutched tightly in his hand. "This might take some time," Detective Rivera warned him. "And given how long it's been—" "I know," Marlowe said. "Just do whatever you need to do." Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky as the team methodically searched the area Ryan had indicated. They expanded their search perimeter when initial scans showed nothing conclusive. Marlowe sat on a fallen log, Cooper beside him, as technicians carefully excavated several spots that the radar had flagged as potential disturbances in the soil. Each time they found nothing significant: old roots, rocks, animal burrows. "He's lying," Marlowe said after the third false alarm. "This isn't the place." Cooper looked grim. Maybe the flooding really did wash away any evidence." He glanced at Ryan, who sat under guard at the edge of the search area, watching the proceedings with an unsettling detachment. By mid-afternoon, Detective Rivera approached them. "We've covered the entire area Mr. Calloway identified, plus a 30-yard radius around it. There's no indication of a burial site." "So now what?" Marlowe asked, despair creeping into his voice. "We expand the search," she said firmly, "and we take Mr. Calloway to the station for formal questioning. Sometimes a different environment jogs memories or encourages more honesty." As Ryan was led away by officers, he looked back at Marlowe. "I told you," he called. "The creek washed everything away. You'll never find her now." Marlowe lunged toward him, but Cooper caught his arm. "Don't. That's what he wants, to see you lose control." Rivera assured Marlowe they would continue searching the area for several more days, and she would keep him updated on Ryan's questioning. Reluctantly, Marlowe agreed to leave the scene. Cooper drove him home in silence. The house on Cedar Street looked exactly as they had left it days ago, but Marlowe felt like a different person walking through the door. "Veronica's flight gets in at 7, he told Cooper, checking his phone messages. "I should pick her up at the airport." "I'll take." "You," Cooper offered. "You shouldn't be driving." While waiting for Veronica's arrival, Marlowe sat in Zoe's room, the yearbook open on his lap, the necklace now resting on top of it. For so long, he had preserved this room as a shrine to his missing daughter. now knowing she would never come home. He wondered if he had been prolonging his own pain all these years. The airport was crowded with summer travelers. Marlowe spotted Veronica immediately as she came through the security gate. She had aged gracefully, her dark hair now streaked with silver, but her green eyes, Zoe's eyes, were red from crying. When she saw Marlowe, she walked straight into his arms, their shared grief bridging the years of separation. "I can't believe it," she whispered against his shoulder. "After all this time." "They haven't found her yet," Marlowe told her as they drove back to town. "Ryan showed us where he says he buried her, but the search team couldn't find anything." "Could he be lying?" Veronica asked. Cooper, driving again, shook his head. "It's possible, but I don't think so. He seemed genuinely surprised when they couldn't find anything. I think he really did bury her there, but the flooding may have washed the remains away, just as he suggested. The news was devastating. Even in death, they might never be able to bring Zoe home." The next morning, Detective Rivera called. "Mr. Calloway has changed his story," she reported. "Now he claims he wasn't alone that night." "What?" Marlowe put the phone on speaker so Veronica and Cooper could hear. "He says he did meet Zoe after her rehearsal, but she was actually planning to meet someone else. He followed her to the meeting place, not the creek, but an old cabin near there that belonged to one of the teachers. When he confronted her, she ran off into the woods. He claims he went looking for her but never found her." "Do you believe him?" Cooper asked skeptically. "We're looking into it," Rivera said. "The cabin he mentioned did belong to a teacher at Pinewood High, a Mr. Preston, who taught drama. He retired about 15 years ago and moved to Florida." "James Preston," Veronica said, recognition in her voice. "He was Zoe's drama teacher." "She loved his class." Marlowe frowned. "What's Ryan saying? That Zoe was meeting Preston that night?" "That's his claim," Rivera confirmed. "We're trying to locate Mr. Preston now for questioning. In the meantime, we're shifting our search to the area around the cabin." After hanging up, Marlowe paced the living room. "This doesn't make sense. Why would Zoe meet her teacher at night in a remote cabin?" "She wouldn't," Veronica said firmly. Unless what?" Cooper prompted. Veronica hesitated. "Zoe did mention once that Mr. Preston was helping her with a problem. I assumed it was about the play or school. This was maybe a week before she disappeared." "Did she say anything about Ryan bothering her?" Marlowe asked. "Not specifically. Just that there was a boy who wouldn't leave her alone, and Mr. Preston offered to help her deal with it." Veronica's eyes widened. "Oh, God! What if Preston was the one who—" The phone rang again. It was Rivera. "We've found something," she said. "Not at the creek, but behind the cabin. The radar picked up an anomaly. We're excavating now." "We're on our way," Marlowe said, already reaching for his car keys. When they arrived at the search site, the team had cordoned off an area behind the old cabin, which was now dilapidated and overgrown. Tarps had been set up to protect the site, and technicians in white coveralls worked carefully within the perimeter. Rivera met them at the edge of the site. "We've found human remains," she said quietly. "Given the location and the preliminary assessment, we believe it's Zoe." Marlowe felt his knees buckle. Cooper caught him while Veronica let out a small cry. "How long before you know for sure?" Cooper asked. "DNA testing will take time, but we also found this." Rivera held up an evidence bag containing a small silver earring. "Mrs. Jenkins, does this look familiar?" Veronica's hand flew to her mouth. "Yes," she whispered. "Those were Zoe's favorite earrings. She was wearing them the day she disappeared." "There's more," Rivera said, her expression grim. The manner of burial and the preliminary findings suggest this wasn't an accident. And based on some other evidence we've found, we don't think Ryan Calloway did this. At least, not alone. What are you saying? Marlowe asked. We're bringing in James Preston for questioning, Rivera answered. And we've found evidence that suggests this may not have been the first time he harmed a student. Marlowe stared at her in shock. Preston? But he was respected, trusted. Everyone liked him. That's often how predators operate, Rivera said grimly. They cultivate a positive reputation as cover for their actions. What evidence? Cooper asked. We found a box buried under the floorboards inside the cabin. It contained jewelry, hair ribbons, notes, souvenirs from different girls. Some date back to the early 1980s, Veronica gasped. He taught at Pinewood for over 20 years. We're contacting other school districts where he worked before and after Pinewood, Rivera continued. This investigation is expanding quickly. Marlowe felt dizzy with the revelation. But what about Ryan? Where does he fit in? We're still questioning him. His story keeps changing, but he's now claiming he saw Preston with Zoe that night. Says he watched from the woods, saw them arguing, saw Preston hit her. He maintains he never touched Zoe himself. Do you believe him? Cooper asked. Rivera's expression was guarded. Parts of his story match the evidence we're finding. We think he may have been watching Zoe from a distance that night, as he admitted to doing regularly. He likely saw something happen at the cabin, but was too afraid to report it. So he stole her necklace instead, Marlowe said bitterly. Kept it as a trophy. We think he went to the cabin after Preston left, found Zoe's necklace on the ground, and took it, Rivera confirmed. He may have convinced himself that his connection to Zoe was something special, rather than what it really was. Stalking. As the forensic team continued their careful excavation, Marlowe, Veronica, and Cooper retreated to Cooper's car. The day had grown hot, and none of them had eaten since morning. They drove to a small diner in town, the same one where Marlowe and Cooper had eaten countless meals during the initial investigation 22 years ago. I can't believe Preston could have done this, Veronica said, pushing her untouched sandwich away. Zoe trusted him. That's what makes it so horrible, Cooper said. He used that trust to isolate her. Marlowe sat in silence, turning Zoe's necklace over and over in his hand. Something was still bothering him, but he couldn't quite place what it was. I need to go home, he said suddenly. There's something I need to check. Back at the house, Marlowe went straight to Zoe's bedroom. The yearbook still lay open on her bed where he had left it that morning. He picked it up, flipping through the pages until he found the drama club photo. What are you looking for? Veronica asked, standing in the doorway, reluctant to enter the preserved shrine to their daughter. I don't know exactly, Marlowe admitted. Something's been nagging at me. He studied the drama club photo carefully. Zoe stood in the back row, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Ryan was on the opposite side of the group, watching her instead of the camera. Mr. Preston stood in the center, a handsome man in his 40s with a confident smile. That's when Marlowe saw it, a small note scribbled in the margin next to the photo in Zoe's handwriting. Last rehearsal at the cabin. Can't wait to get away from RC, Ryan Calloway. Veronica, look at this, Marlowe said, his voice trembling. Zoe wrote this in her yearbook. She was meeting Preston at the cabin that night to get away from Ryan. Veronica took the yearbook, her eyes widening as she read the note. She was going to the cabin on purpose. Preston offered to help her deal with Ryan's stalking, and instead Marlowe couldn't finish the sentence. Cooper, who had followed them into the house, looked over their shoulders at the notation. This could be important evidence. We need to show Rivera." They called the detective, who asked them to bring the yearbook to the station immediately. When they arrived, they found Ryan being questioned in one room while officers prepared for Preston's arrival from Florida in another. Rivera examined the yearbook note carefully. This confirms part of what Ryan has been telling us. Zoe did go to the cabin willingly to meet Preston. Whether it was to discuss Ryan's behavior, as your ex-wife suggested, we may never know for certain. "But why would Preston hurt her?" Marlowe asked. "It doesn't make sense." "Predators don't need logical reasons," Rivera said. "From what we're learning about Preston, he had a pattern of gaining young girls' trust, isolating them, and then—" She paused. "When they rejected his advances, he became violent. We've already identified 3 other missing persons cases at schools where Preston taught. All teenage girls. The reality was almost too horrific to comprehend. While everyone had been focusing on the obvious suspect, Ryan, the stalker, the real monster had been hiding in plain sight, trusted and respected. "What happens now?" Veronica asked, her voice small. "We continue gathering evidence. Preston's flight lands in 2 hours. We'll pick him up at the airport." Rivera's expression was determined. He won't hurt anyone else. As they left the station, Marlowe held the yearbook close. The small note in Zoe's handwriting was the final piece of the puzzle. A clue she had left behind without realizing it. One that had waited 22 years to be discovered. "She led us to the truth," he said softly to Veronica as they walked to the car. "In the end, Zoe helped us find her." 6 hours later, Marlowe, Veronica, and Cooper sat in Rivera's office, watching through a one-way window as James Preston was questioned in the adjoining room. The former drama teacher looked nothing like the confident man in Zoe's yearbook photo. At 72, he was thin and stooped, his once handsome face lined with age, his silver hair thinning. But his eyes were the same, calculating, cold beneath the veneer of confusion he was trying to project. "I don't understand why I'm here," Preston was saying to Rivera and another detective. "I retired from teaching 15 years ago. I haven't been back to Pinewood since. We're investigating the disappearance of Zoe Jenkins," Rivera said, placing a photo of Zoe on the table. "She was a student in your drama class in 1990. "Of course I remember Zoe," Preston said, his expression appropriately sad. "Such a tragedy. A bright, talented girl. We were all devastated when she vanished." "Were you?" Rivera asked coolly. "Because we found her remains buried behind your cabin in the woods." Preston's face went blank for just a moment before the mask of confusion returned. "My cabin? That old place? I sold it years ago. I haven't been there since before I retired." "That's interesting," Rivera said, "because we found quite a collection buried under the floorboards. Items that belonged to several young women, including Zoe Jenkins." She placed photos of the recovered items on the table one by one. Preston's eyes darted from image to image, but he said nothing. "We also found this," Rivera continued, sliding the yearbook across the table, open to the drama club photo with Zoe's handwritten note. "Zoe wrote that she was meeting you at the cabin the night she disappeared, to get away from a boy who was stalking her. Ryan Calloway." "I don't know anything about that," Preston insisted, but sweat had begun to bead on his forehead. "Ryan Calloway says differently," the other detective interjected. "He says he saw you with Zoe at the cabin that night. Says he watched from the woods as you argued with her, as you hit her when she rejected your advances." "That's absurd," Preston sputtered. "Calloway was obsessed with Zoe. Everyone knew it. He's clearly making this up to shift blame from himself." "Maybe," Rivera conceded. "But the evidence doesn't lie. We found Zoe's DNA in the cabin, Mr. Preston. And under the floorboards, we found trophies from other girls. Girls who disappeared from other schools where you taught. Preston's facade finally cracked. His face hardened, the kindly teacher persona, vanishing entirely. "You can't prove anything," he said coldly. "It's been too long. We've already matched DNA from the remains to 3 cold cases," Rivera said. "Technology has come a long way in 22 years, Mr. Preston. We can prove everything." Watching through the window, Marlowe felt a complex mixture of emotions: vindication, grief, and a terrible certainty that Preston would never show genuine remorse for what he had done. "He used Zoe's fear of Ryan to isolate her," Cooper said, quietly. "Offered to help her, to protect her from the boy who was stalking her. Then took advantage of her trust in the worst possible way." Veronica wiped tears from her cheeks. "When she rejected him, he killed her. And all these years, everyone thought Ryan was the one we should have been afraid of." Ryan was dangerous in his own way, Cooper pointed out. His obsession with Zoe was real. His stalking was real. He just wasn't the one who killed her. In the interrogation room, Preston had gone silent, refusing to answer further questions without a lawyer. Rivera gathered her files and stood. "James Preston, you're under arrest for the murder of Zoe Jenkins and suspicion of multiple other homicides," she said formally, reading him his rights as the other detective handcuffed him. As Preston was led from the room, Marlowe stood. Just a moment. Through the one-way glass, it seemed Preston's eyes met his, as if he could see through the mirror to the father of the girl he had murdered. There was no remorse there, no humanity, only cold calculation. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Marlowe and Veronica stood side by side in the Pinewood Cemetery. The small headstone was simple but elegant. Zoe Jenkins, 1974-1990. Beloved daughter, forever 16. The funeral had been small, just family and close friends. Ryan Calloway was not there, having been sentenced to 5 years for evidence tampering and obstruction of justice. Preston faced multiple murder charges and would likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Marlowe placed Zoe's necklace on the grave, finally returning it to its rightful owner. "I keep thinking about how differently things might have turned out," Veronica said, her arm linked through Marlowe's. "If we'd noticed Ryan's behavior sooner. If we'd questioned why a teacher would meet a student alone at night." "We can't change the past," Marlowe said, echoing words he had spoken to Mrs. Waverly what seemed like a lifetime ago. "We can only learn from it." They had both learned painful lessons. About trust, about vigilance, about the masks people wear to hide their true natures. They had also learned about resilience, about how bonds of family could bend but not break, even under the most terrible strain. After the discovery of Zoe's remains and Preston's arrest, Veronica had extended her stay in Pinewood. Days turned into weeks as they worked together to finally put Zoe to rest properly. Somewhere along the way, they had rediscovered something of the connection they once shared. Not the same as before, but something new, forged in the crucible of their shared grief and long-delayed closure. "I should get back to Florida soon," Veronica said as they walked away from the grave. "But I was thinking, maybe I could come back for Christmas this year." "I'd like that," Marlowe said. "Zoe would like it too." As they reached the cemetery gate, Marlowe looked back at his daughter's grave. The yearbook that had started this final chapter of their search now sat in an evidence locker, its seemingly insignificant margin note having proved the key to unlocking the truth. "You know," Cooper had said to him after Preston's arraignment, "in all my years as a detective, I never saw a case solve itself like this. It's like Zoe knew someone would eventually notice what she wrote. Marlowe wasn't sure he believed in signs or messages from beyond, but he did believe in the power of truth to eventually come to light, no matter how long it took, no matter how deeply it was buried. He had kept his promise to Zoe. He had never given up. And though the truth had been painful, it had also been liberating. The not knowing had been its own kind of prison, one from which they were all finally free. "Ready?" Veronica asked, waiting at the gate. Marlowe nodded, taking one last look at the place where their daughter now rested in peace. "Ready," he said, and turned toward the future, carrying Zoe's memory not as a weight, but as a light to guide him forward. The yearbook that sat untouched for 22 years had finally revealed its secret. It wasn't just about noticing what was in the photos, but what Zoe herself had tried to tell them through her own written words. The answer had been there all along, waiting for the day when someone would truly see it. And that's the story of how a father's love and determination finally uncovered the truth hidden in an old yearbook for 22 years. Where are you listening from? Let us know in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Every subscription helps us spread more stories of courage, hope, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another gripping true story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until next time, remember that sometimes the answers we seek are hidden in plain sight, just waiting to be discovered.